St. Paul's Universalist Church on this crisp fall morning. At least the rain has let up. In the way of announcements, I have one up here. This is from Pat, in her capacity as clerk of the board. The Board of Trustees will meet with our broker. I'll bring tissues. On Wednesday, the 16th, at 2 p.m., and a board meeting will follow. Are there any other announcements that anyone wishes to share with the congregation? All right, let us proceed to our call to worship.
Let justice flow, roll down like water, and righteousness like a flowing stream. Let justice roll down like water, and righteousness like a flowing stream.
I open our service with the words of the late author and humorist Mary Ivins, who reminds us it is possible to read the history of this country as one long struggle to extend the liberties established in our Constitution to everyone in America. And as is our custom, we open our services with the lighting of our chalice, and I invite you to join me in the words. May this flame, symbol of transformation since time began, fire our curiosity, strengthen our wills, and sustain our courage. And our opening song is number 149.
Blessed are we, straight from the places our God where we met thee. Blessed our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world we forget thee. Shall we meet thy love, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our faith and land.
Please remain standing and join me in the words of affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church. Quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with one another and with our God.
I ask for one day where I don't have to fear about pain or life that's lost. I ask for one day where whispers of hope are alive inside my heart, where there is freedom and justice and judgment is gone. I ask for one day where I don't have to hear about pain. I ask for one day in my life where there is sunshine through the shadows. Only one day in my life where the world is at peace as I see. Just one day. I ask for one day when I close my eyes and I see the hope in me. I ask for one day where war is a dream of the past, of long ago, where there is freedom and justice and judgment is gone. I ask for one day
So instead of our usual prayerful meditation this morning, I'd like to share a brief story with you. In 1787, the 13 American states held a constitutional convention. And the reason for that was we often think declared independence, won our independence, U.S. Constitution. No. There's a handful of years there where we had our first set of governing principles, which were the Articles of Confederation, and it didn't take long for the country to realize that that wasn't cutting it. I won't bore you with the details, but the founders decided they needed to kind of go back to the drawing board. So delegates from each of the 13 states met to hammer out a new form of government. Now at that point, it would have been much simpler to set up a monarchy like there had been before. And indeed, there had been people who had suggested making George Washington the king. But the founders instead took a different path, a more challenging path. They created a constitution. Now at that time, the mayor of Philadelphia was a man named Samuel Powell. He and his wife, Elizabeth Willing Powell, were well-to-do and influential in the political scene at the time. They were what we would call well-connected. For example, they were good friends with George and Martha Washington, and a lot of the political players would come over to their home for dinner and so forth. It was also said that Elizabeth was the real power behind the couple and their connections in Philadelphia. You have to remember at that time, Philadelphia was the capital. Anyway, the story goes that Mrs. Powell had occasion to speak with none other than Dr. Benjamin Franklin at the conclusion of the Constitutional Convention. And depending on the version of the story, either in her parlor or running into him on the street, she came up to him and said, "Well, doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy?" To which the good doctor replied, "A republic, if you can keep it." Let us now share a moment of silence where we listen to the wisdom of our hearts and minds. Next song is 134. had two observances this past week, Election Day and Veterans Day. And I got to thinking that that's an interesting juxtaposition. Election Day is often considered to be highly partisan, while Veterans Day tends to transcend our political divisions. Without our veterans, after all, we wouldn't have a country to argue over in the first place. And I sometimes despair at the divisions in America. And this week I was wondering how many veterans feel that way. This past week's elections only underscored those ongoing divisions, with neither side of the political landscape being able to claim a decisive mandate, as is often the case in recent history. When I find myself in moments of despair and frustration over the state of our country, it helps me to look back and gain some perspective. Now, one thing I do is I study history and realize that the deeper you dive into our history, the more you realize that there have been divisions right from the beginning. It's not new. The issues change, but the divisions and the outmaneuvering of the political parties, that's been going on pretty much since George Washington's second term. And a lot of our elections historically have had the same rhetoric we hear today, namely that this is the most important election of our lifetime. We hear that every year or two, right? This one is the most important. Fate of the nation rests upon it. But at the same time, there are ideas and notions that unify us as Americans. There are writings that I would call secular scripture. By that, I mean that they are held as sacred by many people, but they're not necessarily religious in nature. Here are some examples. Now, you've heard of all of these, but just like religious scripture, helps to periodically hear them again. From the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And of course, there's the preamble of the Constitution that I spoke of in my reading. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. In his Gettysburg Address, which he personally thought he was going to give and, it would be largely forgotten, Abraham Lincoln expressed his wish that this nation shall have a new birth of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from the earth. And at the base of our Statue of Liberty, there's a tablet that includes these words: "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." Some of you may remember this. At his first inauguration, President Franklin D. Roosevelt gave hope to a deeply hurting and scared nation with the words, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." From the original text of the Pledge of Allegiance: "One nation indivisible, with liberty and justice for all." And Dr. Martin Luther King, when he spoke of his dream of a future where his children and others like them would be judged not on the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. A time when the sons of former slaves and sons of former slave owners could sit down together at the table of brotherhood. Now, there's a lot more secular scripture, I'm sure if we put our heads together, that we could think of and come up with and share, but you get the idea. Like traditional religious scriptures, secular scripture is meant to inspire. There's a reason that we remember these words. But I want to get back today to the passage from one of those sets of words, the part of the Constitution's preamble that says, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union." How does one make something more perfect? It seems contradictory, doesn't it? If something is perfect, then by definition, it cannot be made more perfect. But nonetheless, those are the words the founders chose. Why would they use that particular term? This wasn't something they just kind of casually threw together. They argued back and forth about a lot of that document. What does perfecting the union even look like? I like to think that it means that our nation's founders knew full well that they were not perfect, that what they were helping to bring into being was not perfect, that there was room for improvement, and that the country would change over time and needed a document that would be able to accommodate that and adjust and adapt to that. The Constitution was designed to be a foundation upon which to build a democratic republic. In theory, at the start, it provided freedoms for all of its citizens. In practice, at the time, that meant white male landowners. Women had no say in the government. Blacks in the North were second-class citizens and slaves in the South. And despite having been here long before European settlers, Native Americans were not considered citizens. But times did change, as the founders knew it would. Eventually, the words of our Constitution and our Declaration of Independence before it came to represent the rights of all male citizens, whether they were white, brown, or black. And then, again, it changed to include women when it granted them the right to vote. And those documents were the impetus behind the civil rights movement in the 1960s. More recently, they have been used in support of things like marriage equality. And these changes have come about in fits and starts. Sometimes we've taken one step forward and two back. And our union is still not perfect. We struggle to be indivisible. There is not equal justice for all. If you have a big enough bank account, you can probably buy a little more equal justice than someone who does not. But we are a lot closer to that perfect union today than we were when those secular scriptures, as I call them, were first written and spoken. So what does a more perfect union start to look like? Well, to me, it means making the promise of America available to us, to as many people as possible. We, the people, should be as inclusive as much as possible. And we can choose to continue the work of perfecting that union when and where we can. I've always found it a little odd. We have Black History Month, Women's History Month, Pride Month, and so on and so forth. And I've spoken to people, encountered people, who are resentful of that. They'll say things to me like, well, what about White History Month, or or Men's History Month, or Straight Pride Month? My answer, that they either see as a good point or kind of get in a huff over, is that every month is white, straight, male history month. That's the privilege of being in the social majority. Perfecting the union, among other things, means working toward making a society that is so inclusive of its citizens, regardless of their color, their gender, their sexual orientation, their ethnicity, their political affiliation, any of that stuff. Making it so inclusive that there would be no need to set aside a month to recognize them as an individual group. They would simply be part of the American tapestry, truly accepted, truly equal. Now, despite the incendiary rhetoric we see in the media on all sides, Americans are more united than we might believe. This gives me reason to hope. Recent studies have shown that when liberals and conservatives are asked to judge the values of the others, so liberals saying what they think conservatives believe, conservatives saying what they think liberals believe, they're really bad at it. They're really bad at it, statistically speaking. One quick example, and either one of these might surprise you. Most liberals support law enforcement, statistically, and most conservatives believe in at least some form of gun control. And when you put people from both camps together in a room, they often find common ground. Came across this the other day over breakfast of all things, and I thought I would share it with you. And I hope it's not dry. I hope it gives you the hope it gave me. There was a series of surveys conducted from January to July of this year. And they took several groups, and each group was comprised of 1,500 American citizens. But they were divided in such a way as to reflect current demographics in our country, meaning there were the same percentages of people of certain ages, genders, races, educational levels, and so on, as there is in the country overall. So it's not one of those where you say, well, of course it went this way, you oversampled this group or that group. They really tried to make it a cross-section of what the overall national population looks like. And when they did that, they found 50 things, and I'm not going to go over all of them, that a majority of them, and by majority 60% or more, agreed on. Okay, so here are some of the highlights, and some of these you'll be like, well, duh, and others you might be like, what? 60% or more agree on this? But again, it's a cross-section of America. 73% think that teachers are underpaid, especially between gun violence and COVID and all those mandates. 88% say that inflation is a serious problem for them, and yet 61% are not worried about losing their jobs because the labor market is so tight. 79% support Social Security. 74% have a favorable view of food stamp programs. 61% say that illegal immigration is a problem. To no one's surprise, 64% believe that there are too many political ads. And that's the same percentage, 64, that believe that abortion should be legal in most or all cases. 71% believe that America has become more partisan in recent years. 76% say, that's kind of interesting, 76, that they feel patriotic toward the country. 78% believe declaring our independence was the right thing for our founders to do, and 65% think that those same founders would be disappointed at how the great American experiment has been working out. 77% support the American flag. 69% think a civil war would be a bad thing. 65% support law enforcement, and 77% have a positive view of our armed forces. Except for the Marines, 78% of people approve of the Marines. And that brings me back around to Veterans Day. The men and women who serve our country take an oath to defend our Constitution. Their service helps to preserve ideas like we the people in order to form a more perfect union. They do this not just for one part of America, not one gender or race or ethnic group or sexual orientation or political party, but for all Americans. And I think we sometimes forget that. Though it may never be perfect, may we the people never give up on the dream of our founders for a more perfect union. May we remember that we share a common set of secular scripture, and that we are more united and have more in common than we might think. Amen. Closing song is number 318. The Constitution is worth saving, the rule of law is worth saving, democracy is worth saving, but these things can and will be lost if everyone waits around for someone else. Please join me in the words as we extinguish the chalice. We extinguish this chalice flame, daring to carry forward the vision of this free faith. That freedom, reason, and justice will one day prevail in this nation